Arrays is an example of data structures. What exactly is an array? The simplest answer to that is that an array is a list of values. In Java terminology, we refer to arrays as a container object. There are more container objects, and you will understand better what that means when we have become more familiar with more data structures and the Java language itself. What characteristics does an array have as a data structure? The arrays are homogeneous, which means that every single element they have stored in them has exactly the same type as the next element or the previous element. The arrays is a static data structure. I need to know from the very beginning what size of an array I need. How many elements exactly am I going to store and process? If I find out later that, oops, I should have made the array, one element bigger, this is kind of too late. I cannot change that same array in any way. I can do other things. I can create a new array, couple of the data that I already have, and add this new element that I had not foreseen before. But I cannot change the same array object. A great characteristic that arrays have is that they are random access. If I want to access element 5, I can just go ahead and access it without having to go through the previous elements first. A final point, which is quite important and sometimes confusing to beginner programmers, is that arrays are an example of a reference type. The arrays are references. This point will be made more clear once we see a few diagrams and a few pictures after we create our first arrays. An analogy that will probably make you understand this better is that we can think of a string as an array of characters. Note that in some programming languages, this is exactly how a string is implemented in the language. A string is an array of characters. This is not the case in Java. In Java, strings are like an array of characters. In Java, strings are immutable. We cannot go and say, please change the character at the 4th position and instead of an A, make it an O. The string class does provide us methods with which we can access characters and even go and change strings, but those seemingly changing methods are actually creating a new string every time. The strings are immutable in Java. We cannot change a string. Every time we perform an operation that results in a different string, that is a new string. We have not changed the original string. Let's go through the steps that we need in order to be able to use an array. The first thing we need to do is actually declare the array variable, in the same way that we would have double D and then be able to go and store double values and use them. How do we declare an array variable? Here is an example that you have seen, although you have probably not realized what it does. The args variable has type a string array. This is how we declare it. We use these square brackets next to a type in order to denote that this variable is actually an array of that type. In general, we will be using the type name, square brackets, and then the variable name. It is also syntactically correct. It will not produce any compile time errors if you put the square brackets after the variable name. However, it is a good practice to put the square brackets right next to the type name. And why is that? This allows you to look at the variable type and see in one place its type. You don't have to combine, the type name and the square brackets from two different places in order to figure out what is the type of a variable. The square brackets and the type name are together. It gives you a good idea of what the type of that variable is. What can the type name be? Any primitive or reference type. And what is the variable name? Like usual, a standard Java identifier, any name that you would use for any other kind of variable. Let's go to an even more interesting point. How do we create an array object? We said that arrays are references, so there are array objects. How do we create any class object? We use our friendly new operator. Same way here. If we want to create a string array, we are going to use the operator new, and then the type of that array, string, and then inside the square brackets we will not have them empty, the space there, but we will actually put a number. What is that number? It will tell Java how many elements we need inside that array. Here comes a point where we were saying that arrays as a data structure are static. Upon the creation of the array, we need to tell how many elements do we want that array to have. We cannot dynamically change the size of the array later. Again, the type name can be any primitive or reference type. The size is just an expression that results is evaluated into an int. How do we access an array element? Well, how would we access the value of a double variable? We just get the name of that variable. Similarly with arrays, we named our array args. If I want to access the element that is at the first position, we're going to say args of 0. Remember that in exactly the same way as with strings, indexing in arrays starts from 0. So the first element has index 0, the second element has index 1. In general, we use the array object reference and then the index of the element that we want to access. What is the array object reference? It is an expression, for example, a variable that actually references the array object. The following pictures will make that a little bit clearer, so just be a little bit patient. The int value again is just an expression that will have to be evaluated and result into an int, so that is actually the index of the element that we want to be accessing. Here's the picture that I'm hoping that will help you a lot understand of what is going on when we are declaring an array variable, creating an array through that variable. You see on your screen a statement that is very common in programs. What is going on there? Let's see it step by step. This statement has 3 parts, so let's make sure we understand each of them. The first part is the declaration of the array variable. What does that say? It says that from now on the name list will be coupled to an int array. Does that part create an array? No. Remember, arrays are actually reference types. So what happens when we declare an array variable? We only get the amount of memory we need in order to be able to store a reference. How much memory do we need to store a reference? As much memory as we need in order to store a memory address, a number. Remember the discussion we had about the differences between primitive types and references. If you don't quite understand that, please refer back to those videos. The second thing that happens is the actual creation of the array, and that happens again with the new operator. New int 5, it allocates in the memory 5 spaces so that we can store 5 integers. At the same time, all those elements, all those integers, get a default value, and the default value for an int is the value 0. So the second thing that happens, the creation of the array, all of the elements get the default value. Final step, the assignment operator. We make the list variable reference that particular array that we just created. How do we access an element of that array? Say, for example, that we want to access the fourth element, then we will use the array variable, and we will say list of 3. Again, see that it goes from 0, 1, 2, 3. So that is actually the fourth element of the array, the element right before the last one.